There was a book that I bought when I was younger. It was called Things That Go Bump in the Night by Brad Steiger. I got it at Barnes and Noble, and I used to always scare myself. These stories would creep me out, man, and I just wanted to share with you guys. It's the spooky season. I just want to put some content out there. Just need something to do. This is a little chapter, a little story in that book. Things that go bump in the night. These are really good stories. You can like listen to this. I don't know. Maybe if you're driving. Maybe if you're just trying to go to sleep. Let my voice calm you. Here we go. This story is called, or this chapter is called People, Animals, and Things That Fall into Other Dimensions. It's pretty interesting. Let's give it a read. I'll stop periodically and put my 2 cents in, whatever. I don't want to just read this straight verbatim, stealing someone else's content. I want to interject my own little thoughts. So let's get into it. On June 3rd, 1968, Dr. and Mrs. Gerardo Vidal attended a family reunion at the home of Senor Rapagini in Chascomús, a town situated near National Route 2 in Buenos Aires province, Argentina. Look, I'm sorry for pronouncing some of these and my intonations being a little bit off. I'm just not used to reading street names and other like province, Argentina. It's so weird. Buenos Aires province. I thought Buenos Aires was a country. Why is it a province? I don't understand that. Geography was not my strongest subject in school. Let's continue. The Vidals arrived in the late afternoon, partook in a lavish dinner, then began the drive back to their residence at Maipu. Okay, it's spelled Maipu, and I think it's pronounced Maipu. Again, that's a funny name. I don't mean to make fun, but it's just makes me laugh. Maipu. I mean, come on. You can't tell me that don't make you laugh. Who Another couple who happened to be both near neighbors in Maipu and relatives attending the same celebration decided to leave at the same time as the Vidals. Okay, so now we have the stage set. The Vidals left from Buenos Aires province, Argentina. They were going back to their residence in Maipu, and they had neighbors who were also at the same event in Buenos Aires, heading back, following them towards Maipu. Okay, let's continue. The two cars set out on Route 2 just a few minutes before midnight. The first couple arrived back in Maipu without incident, but they waited for the Vidals to show up before continuing on to their own home. Okay, it's scary, but when you're driving, especially at night during these long rural roads, you want some company. There's safety in numbers, right? So I think that's what they were doing here. Okay, let's continue. After they had waited for several minutes, they began to fear that the Vidals might have met with an accident. They discussed the matter for but a few more moments. Then they decided to go back into their automobile and retrace the route back to Chascomús in order to look for the Vidals. Although the hour was late, their concern for their relatives outweighed considerations for their own comfort. But strangely enough, they traveled the entire 80 miles back to the Rapaginis without seeing a trace of the Vidals or their automobile. Okay, that would be creepy. My immediate assumption, if I was this other couple retracing my steps, I probably would have thought they took a turn to like another road or something. Maybe they took a shortcut. Maybe they stopped for some hanky panky, if you know what I mean. But let's continue. Deciding against staying the night in Chascomús, they set out once again on Route 2 to Maipu. This time, they strained their eyes at virtually every foot of the highway in an attempt to see down the steep banks. They returned to Maipu without having seen a trace of the Vidals. A telephone call to the Maipu hospital informed them that no accidents had been reported that night. Now, this is something that I always wondered about because you always hear about these people calling hospitals and police stations to see if there's anything reported. Do people actually do that if someone's missing, or in an event like this, do people actually call and ask the hospital? Do the hospital, are they allowed to divulge that information? I don't know. I've grown up always being told to mind your business. And I know that when you ask companies questions, they always ask questions back like, why are you back there? Why do you need all these empty bags from our store? You know, things like that. Anyways, we continue. The Vidals had disappeared without a trace and without a clue. Then, 48 hours later, Senor Rappaccini received a long-distance telephone call from the Argentine consulate in Mexico City, Mexico. It was Dr. Vidal. Incredulously, Rappaccini listened to his friend, asking him to remain calm and not to worry about them. He and his wife were both safe and unharmed. They would be flying back to Buenos Aires, and Dr. Vidal gave him the date and hour of their arrival so that they might be met at the airport. Okay, that's pretty crazy, right? 2 days later, you get a call from this couple that's been missing for 2 days. Out the blue, you get the call, and it's from a whole nother city. It's from a whole nother country. Like, where did y'all disappear to? I like these stories of mystery like this, and let's see if we can figure out what happened, because this is intriguing. Intriguing. Astonished, friends and relatives gathered to meet the plane from Mexico City. Dr. Vidal emerged from the airplane wearing the same clothes that he had been wearing on the evening of their mysterious disappearance. Mrs. Vidal was taken directly from the airport to a private clinic, the victim of a violent nervous crisis. Yeah, let's see, this is getting interesting. Dr. Vidal had been admonished by the consulate not to issue any public statements about their strange teleportation from the province of Buenos Aires to Mexico, but he did relate enough details of the bizarre journey for the newspaper La Razón to put together a story made up of comments from Dr. Vidal and interviews with the Vidal friends and relatives. Okay, so the consulate advised the Vidals not to make any public statements about their strange teleportation from the province of Buenos Aires to Mexico City. That seems suspicious. Why wouldn't you want people to know what happened to them unless they were the ones behind this strange teleportation? That doesn't sit right with me. I think there was some foul play. Maybe they were picked up and kidnapped back to Mexico City. I don't know the specifics of how these countries were, if they were friendly or not. I don't know. This is interesting. Let's continue. A correspondent in Argentina sent this author copies of the various reports printed in La Razón, and the eerie account has been translated as follows. Okay, just to let y'all know, I'm kind of familiar with La Razón. I feel like I've seen that publication out in the public before. I mean, I'm in Texas. We have a lot of crossover with Mexico and their programs and stuff like that, right? And La Razón, man, if I'm not mistaken, they're the ones that always have like the really hot chicks on the cover, and it's very interesting how like Mexico, they have these shows. I think there's one called Alarma TV where it has like the hottest, sexiest news anchor spokespeople that work on the show, that are hosts, and then they show you the most graphic and violent videos like from across the net and stuff. I think it's interesting how the line between like sexiness and trauma is walked between in these channels. It's kind of like Hellraiser, how there's no difference between pleasure and pain, and it's always striking to me. Anyways, we shall continue. Dr. Vidal and his wife left the city of Chascomas a few minutes before midnight and were traveling on Route 2. They were listening to the radio and driving at a speed which would permit them to keep the taillights of their friends' automobile always in view. Okay, so that's referring to the couple that was in front of them that made it to the city before, and then they retraced their steps for the whole 80 miles back. All right. They were just outside the suburbs of Chascomas when the Vidal's automobile became enveloped in a dense fog bank. He slowed down. The Vidals became aware only of blackness. The next thing Dr. and Miss Vidal knew was that it was suddenly bright daylight and they were on an unfamiliar road. When Dr. Vidal stepped out of the car to investigate the situation, he was amazed to discover that every bit of paint had been scorched off the automobile's surface. Oh, now that's weird, isn't it? You drive through a dense fog bank and then all the paint is scratched off. It's nighttime, you go through a fog, and now it's daytime and all of the paint scratched off. I mean, sounds like it could be military. Let's go. Dr. Vidal flagged down a passing motorist to ask directions. Completely nonplussed, that's a weird word, he returned to his wife to tell her that the man had said that they were outside of Mexico City, another continent and several thousand miles away from their home. Later in the Argentine consulate, they had to accept another startling fact. Their blackout during the strange trip had lasted for 48 hours. 2 days missing. So missing time, that's a familiar case in all of these UFO abduction cases and all of these stories, right? That's a familiar trope. Let's see what else happens. In spite of the halo of fantasy that the story of the Vidal seems to wear, La Razón commented, there are certain details which do not cease to preoccupy even the most unbelieving. The entrance of Vidal's wife into a Buenos Aires clinic, the proved arrival of the couple on an airplane that arrived non-stop from Mexico, the disappearance of the car, the intervention of the consulate, the serious attitude of the police in Maipú in regard to the event, and the telephone call from Mexico to the Rapellini, which was confirmed by La Razón, to make all of this acquire the status of a matter worthy of being considered in these times of space adventures and fantastic disappearances of flying saucers. Have you ever read a sentence? Have you ever read a whole paragraph and then like it not register? It's like you just wake up whenever you're done reading it. I think that's just what happened. I'm going to have to listen back. I don't want to reread that. In a follow-up to the strange account of the Vidals' experience, La Razón interviewed Professor Alejandro Iru, secretary of the Argentine College of Parapsychology, for his remarks on the peculiar case. Iru, professor of humanities at the University of La Plata, responded by providing the reporter with 3 similar cases of unexplainable transportations. Okay, so this isn't the first time this happened. I don't know, man. I would be tripping balls if I ever was teleported somewhere. I know I would have questions to answer. First off, my wife would probably be all over me like, where the hell were you? I mean, who would believe such a fantastic story that I was just driving down the road and I disappeared for 48 hours? And then she'd probably be like, well, why did you clear out your bank account before you disappeared? That's funny. Okay, so these are some more stories of these unexplainable transportations. Let's see what the Professor Iru says. A man who lived near Bahia Blanca suffered a dizziness when a strange aerial craft appeared before him. Professor Iru said, 10 minutes later he came to, but found himself in Salta, one of the northernmost provinces in Argentina. The authorities in both locales communicated with each other immediately, and the man's automobile was found in Bahia Blanca, in exactly the spot where he claimed it would be. Okay, so that's one story. This guy got dizzy when a strange aerial craft appeared before him. If I'm standing outside my house where I'm presuming this guy would be, because it doesn't say where he was, I'm just going to say if I was outside my house and a strange aerial object appeared in front of me, I would get pretty freaked out too. I'd probably get busy. I'd probably get dizzy and want to faint too. And apparently, maybe that's what happened. And this guy was abducted. Or maybe there's just a lot of strange phenomenon going on in the country of Argentina or province of Argentina. I really don't know. I know Argentina. I thought it was a country. Is it a continent? It's in South America, I think. I don't know, guys. I'm sorry for being such a dumbass. The second case Professor Iru delineated for the journalist involved a professor of law on the faculty of Santos. This man claimed that a flying disc had sucked him on board. Why'd I say it like that? This man claimed that a flying disc had sucked him aboard and had taken him on a fantastic aerial journey before it released him. Professor Iru said, all right, that's a pretty, I think that's a Twilight Zone episode. Communicating entities were involved in the third case history the professor presented to La Razón. This experience involves a most widely known and highly responsible painter, sculptor, and theatrical artist whose initials are BSP. Okay, you won't tell us the name, just say BSP? Or maybe it's a name that's too hard to pronounce, so they just say the initials. But if it's a highly responsible painter, sculptor, and theatrical artist, I think he wants attention. So this one I'm going to take with a grain of salt. The other two, I'm just going to believe blindly. But this one, this guy's a theatrical artist. Like, come on. Already, right off the bat, we know he likes attention. But let's continue. For many years, he was the director of the art salon of the Municipal Pink. BSP testified that he had been contacted by a blond Nordic-appearing man who had eyes so clear that he appeared blind. The blond spoke in a guttural, unintelligible language, but his mannerisms were friendly. The artist got only a glimpse of the inside of the entity's craft before a wave of dizziness engulfed him. Okay, so this is a Nordic alien. And I think this is where like the Nazis and stuff may have started beginning to think that they were like the ultimate race, because there's like the different races of aliens and stuff. And the Nordics are one of them. And then there's the reptiles, right? The reptilians. And I don't know about you guys, but I kind of believe in this stuff because I've seen some people that look like freaking lizards. I know you guys have too. Don't lie. And before I continue, that word guttural, unintelligible language, the word guttural, I've heard it so much in like these creepy pastas that like it just lost all meaning. And I don't know if I really believe a story when they use the word guttural growl, or like another one is AI. Whenever you generate a script and it gives you, trust me, I've done this before and I feel like a cheap whore for doing it, but you generate a script and it gives you the wording and verbiage and all that. They always use the word nightmare fuel. And it's cringe. I hate hearing that anytime I'm listening to a video and the narrator is like, it's pure nightmare fuel. I'm like, okay, ChatGPT wrote this script for you, man. Just admit it. But I'm trying not to use ChatGPT. I'm just trying to give you all me, baby. Anyways, let's continue. The artist got only a glimpse of the inside of the entity's craft before a wave of dizziness engulfed him. Oh, I already said that. When he awakened, Professor Iru went on. BSP saw that he was flying along with 3 blonde beings. One of them, very gentle, interrogated him in a language also unintelligible, but BSP understood, or at least believed he perceived the man's thoughts by telepathic communications. Okay, this sounds a lot to me like it's tongues. They say like when you speak in tongues, it's a language that everybody understands, like universally. It's a universal language, and that's biblical, you guys. Read up on it. BSP was told not to be frightened. They would return him to Earth in precisely the same spot from which they had plucked him. BSP said that all during the flight, he was in a kind of a swoon, but he believed that he saw beneath him the terrain of Japan, France, and later Chile. When he awakened from the peculiar trance state, he found himself to be standing in the exact same spot at which he had first encountered the blonde being. Okay, again, geography is not my strong suit. Maybe this guy, he was a painter. Maybe he painted globes. I don't know. If I'm up in the air, if I'm over the earth, I don't think I could tell you what China looks like. I can't point it out. I couldn't do it. But this guy was able to. It makes the story more better. In a summation for La Razón, Professor Iru said, in none of these cases do the witnesses speak of hallucinations, nor do they speak of having been intoxicated or doped. What caused these phenomena? Well, unfortunately, we cannot answer that conclusively. It may be that friends from other worlds possess some type of electromagnetic wave with which they attract any non-magnetic object from the surface of the earth, so that they might use this object in their studies. La Razón asked the professor how parapsychology viewed such a theory. From our viewpoint, Professor Iru answered, we find it noteworthy that these beings can manage telepathy with such great mastery, because they seem to be able to make our minds understand things which cannot be expressed by speech. At the same time, they capture, without difficulty, our answers. Nothing more, with any seriousness, can be said of these phenomena at this time. But for some special reason, the North Americans have kept the Vidals' car in their powerful laboratories to examine it. Author's note, the Vidal's car at Peugeot 403 was said to have been sent to the United States for examination in scientific laboratories. Dr. Vidal received another automobile of the same make in exchange for it. Okay, because I was just about to ask what the hell America, how they got their hands on the car. How did they even hear about this? There must have been some sort of communications between the two countries. I mean, USA, right? With the powerful laboratories. This is just freaky all around. And I guess Peugeot 403 was a type of car. Peugeot 403. Google it. Let's see if it's real. In the September-October 1970 issue of Flying Saucer Review, Creighton reported that Mrs. Vidal died of leukemia early in 1969. This information having been revealed through a slip-up by a member of the family to an investigator whose country of origin is in continental Europe. Could Mrs. Vidal's fatal bout with leukemia have been prompted by exposure to intense radiation during that bizarre 48-hour disappearance and teleportation to Mexico? And did the Vidals drive into a hole in time and space, a tear in our dimension which leads to another? Or were they transported from one geographical location to another by beings from another world or another dimension? I mean, that does make you think. If like a lot of radiation was used to teleport them, we don't know if these beings are immune to radiation, because we know damn sure that we human beings aren't. Did you watch Chernobyl on HBO? Man, that is scary. Same issue of Flying Saucer Review, Creighton reported several other alleged teleportations which occurred in South American countries shortly after the Vidal's mysterious flight. Yeah, so something's definitely going on in South American countries. A young, newlywed Brazilian couple stopped for a rest as they traveled through the southern Brazilian state of Rio Grande do Sul. They were sitting in their Volkswagen when they were both overcome by drowsiness. When they awakened, They were in Mexico. Man, that's kind of weird that everybody keeps ending up in Mexico. Maybe Mexicans really are aliens. Nah, hey man, I'm Mexican myself. Don't trip on me. In another case in Rio Grande do Sul, two young men traveling by jeep claimed to have run into a bank of white fog. Oh, look, there goes that white fog again. The next thing they knew was that they were on an unknown landscape, which turned out to be in bum 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 Mexico. Man, this is starting to freak me out, you guys. Creighton quotes the January 15, 1969 issue of the Rio de Janeiro newspaper, Diario de Noticias, which speaks of two other cases of instant transportation. Okay, man, there's a lot of stuff going on back then. I wonder if this stuff still happens now. Maybe it does and we just don't believe it because of all the AI crap. Let's continue. There are rumors that two persons who were traveling in their car along the President Dutra motorway were transported from there to a town in the USA and close to the Mexican border. Wow, I'm shocked. Now we're in the USA. The car bore marks made by the hooks of the transportating. Why do I say transportating? It's not transportating, it's transporting. The car bore marks made by the hooks of the transporting vehicle. Okay, this is making it seem like it's like a fishing hook or something. Did you ever see that one episode of Futurama where everyone was disappearing and they thought it was the rapture, but it turns out it was just like alien fish up in the atmosphere, like sending down hooks and fishing for humans? I don't know, that's what this made me think of. Another Brazilian couple named Azambuja are also said to have been transported to Mexico in their car in similar circumstances. Man, I don't know, these aliens seem to be trafficking people from other countries to Mexico. That's what it seems like to me. But let's continue. It would seem that somewhere in Brazil there exists an ultra-dimensional shortcut to Mexico, or were these automobiles really transported by some otherworldly or other dimensional vehicles? I think they may have been drugged and just taken to Mexico. I don't know. This is pretty crazy. You don't know what these mind altering drugs would do. In numerous cases discussed in other books, there have been reports of the simultaneous manifestation of mist, fog, or white clouds with the strange disappearances. Creighton recounts the experiences of Graciela de Lourdes Jimenez. Okay, that was more names than I expected to say. Graciela de Lourdes Jimenez, an 11-year-old Argentinian girl who walked into a cloud of white mist and was not seen again for 3 hours. When she did reappear, she found herself in an unfamiliar section of town. Don't say Mexico. She was weeping in a distraught state. She appealed to a resident of the area for help. That's pretty creepy. Could you imagine? But look, she was 11. She got lost in a dense fog and ended up somewhere else. I mean, for 3 hours though, that's pretty crazy. Maybe she had a bout of like, maybe she had a manic episode. This is creepy. I'm starting to creep myself out. In another instance, Senor Marcillo Ferraz and his wife encountered a white cloud on the road as they neared the frontier of Brazil in Uruguay. When they regained consciousness, they too found themselves in Mexico. Goddamn Mexico. Both of the Ferrazes suffered severe traumatic shock. And when Senor Ferraz learned that he had developed a tumor on the brain, he shot himself. Okay. I mean, that's pretty tragic. First we had one lady develop leukemia after a strange transportation, whatever you want to call it. And then this guy was transported from Uruguay to Mexico. he found that he developed a tumor on the brain. I would say the tumor may have attributed to his disappearance, but his wife was there too to account for it. So I wonder what happened with the wife. Was she okay? Hopefully. I hate hearing about, people dying and stuff, man. It's sad. It's too much of it. Brings me down. Anyways, the newspaper Diario de Noticias and Folha de Joyas. Look, I don't know Brazilian, Portuguese. I don't know. It's a gutter language. Nah, I'm just messing with you. I'm just messing around, you guys. But really, I don't know how to read this word. Folha de Goiás. It's Portuguese, y'all. I don't know it. Both carried accounts of a bizarre case which occurred in the state of Goiás, Brazil, on the night of April 20th, 1969. In this instance, a Senor Dolor Roque saw some lights as he was riding into the town of Itucu on his horse to obtain some medicine from a pharmacy. When he next opened his eyes, he found himself on the bank of the Paranaíba River. Why did I add that extra tongue roll for river? Near a place known as Itumbiara, a distance of 250 miles from Itucu. Man, look, next, can I just get a story of somewhere in America where I know how to pronounce the names? Anyways, hailing a man with a horse and a cart, Roque beseeched the driver to take him to the nearest bus station. When he returned to his home, he found his family very distressed by his disappearance, since the horse had made its way back to the stable the night before. Okay, that's weird. He disappeared, but his horse didn't. I think this guy may have stopped off for something. Men do crazy things sometimes for love. Researchers who set themselves the task of investigating such baffling phenomenon have long observed that those instances in which human beings, animals, and such inanimate objects as stones, pottery, and buildings are transported from one place to another are among the most puzzling of all paranormal occurrences. Yeah, I'd say that's pretty weird. They said animals and inanimate objects like stones, pottery, and buildings. I could see how animals might transport from one place to another. They're not going to communicate to us where they're going. They're just going to go. But buildings? I want to hear the story about a building being transported from one place to another. I mean, that's interesting. Does all the plumbing go with it? I mean, that's so weird, right? Like, I don't know. That's structural shit, man. Anyways, author Harold T. Wilkins once commented that mysteries such as instances of teleportation should serve as a reminder that the physical universe holds surprises for those who rashly predetermine that all natural phenomena may be summed up in mathematical equations and neatly listed in a textbook. That was a long sentence. To scientists willing to consider the as yet unknown, teleportations stand as a challenge to research in a field with no less real and potentially fruitful than atomic energy. Wilkins has retold an account of an eerie case of an interrupted teleportation that occurred in Bristol, England on December 9th, 1873. Okay. Let's keep it in the 20th century. Can we just keep it in the 20th century? Because going back to the 1800s, 1700s, they used their imaginations a lot more back then. That's all I'm saying. Anyways, in this instance, an elderly couple who identified themselves as the Thomas Cumstons, I guess that's how they referred to themselves. The woman just assumes the guy's identity, I guess. They told authorities an incredible story of being nearly sucked into a hole in space. Hey, any hole's a good hole, right? The Cumstons had been staying at the Victoria Hotel across from the railroad station, preparatory to a visit to a seaside resort. At 3 that morning, they had been awakened by a terrible noise in their room. The floor seemed to split and open, and their cries of terror seemed to be strangely repeated and re-echoed. Okay, I think we're getting into a building thing. I was just asking. I want to hear about a building being transported. Well, let me not jump the gun. Let's continue. Thomas Crumston fell down and began to vanish in the mysterious hole in the floor. Mrs. Crumston got hold of her husband's arm and began pulling him to safety. We screamed, Mrs. Crumston told the authorities, yet each time our screams were most horribly re-echoed. I said to my husband, "Take out your pistol and fire it." He fired it into the ceiling, yet the terrible noises continued. Okay, it's 3 in the morning, and this guy just gets sucked into a hole in the floor. Yeah, because it said the floor seemed to split and open. And then this guy just had his gun on him. Did he sleep with his gun? Maybe he was a real gangster. I don't know. Let's continue. In desperation, the couple fled by way of the bedroom window, dropping the 10 feet to the street below them. They hurried to the railroad station, where they told the night superintendent that they had escaped from a den of thieves and rogues. Okay, that's not what happened, but let's continue. Bristol police authorities searched the Crumstons' hotel room, but could find nothing that could in any way account for the elderly couple's bizarre tale. When they interviewed the landlady, they obtained her comment that she had heard some strange noises coming from their room, but that the sounds were of a nature beyond her experience. Yeah, the way people talked back then, it's just, it's so romantic, isn't it? The Crumstons were considered respectable people of good social position in their home city of Leeds. So, they were dismissed in charge of their attorney, and it was recorded in the official accounts that the couple had suffered most remarkable kind of collective hallucination. I mean, look, they were an elderly couple. They were in good social standings, but dude, your brain when you're at that age, even when you're younger, you don't know about we didn't think about mental illness like we do today. It wasn't as studied, I don't think, back then. But let's continue. Harold T. Wilkins observed in his retelling of the strange tale that it becomes impossible to explain the strange noises and the hole in the floor, unless one assumes that under certain conditions an unknown force operates, which is able to create a vortex in solid matter. It should be noted that the matter is solid only relative to human perceptions. On the atomic level, it may be described as mostly empty space. A human being drawn into such a vortex or whirlpool may be deposited in some spot dozens and even thousands of miles from its starting point. So I think it's referring to like wormholes and stuff. And yeah, like everything's only solid relative to how we perceive it, right? Man, this guy was on some good stuff, man. As we have already noted, things as well as people may be drawn into these weird vortexes and transported to other places or other dimensions. In 1968, an elderly Maine resident wrote a letter to the Bangor Daily News on the Main Street column, which told of a barn that totally disappeared during a rainstorm. Okay, now we're getting the building. According to Henry Davis, the incident occurred during the month of June 1924. He remembered the day well because he had driven to school to pick up his children so that they would not be drenched in the heavy rain. About a mile out of the town of Monson, where the Davies lived at the time, there stood a large farm building known locally as Sprague's Barn. The barn had been constructed of heavy, hand-sawn timbers, and it stood in the midst of a large field. The next morning, the residents of Monson were astonished to learn that the huge barn had completely disappeared. Although some people worked on the theory that a tornado had suddenly swooped down and picked up the large and sprawling building, the twister hypothesis seemed weak when it was noted that not a single shingle or bit of timber lay anywhere in the area. Letter writer Davis went on to state that even though construction has been quite heavy in that area during the past 60 years, no one has ever found a single board, nail, or implement from Sprague's barn. Frank Edwards, popular storyteller of the unusual, summarized an account of a vanishing Eskimo village for his book Stranger Than Science. According to available records, the 30 inhabitants of the village on the shore of Lake Anjakuni had been going about their mundane daily tasks when they simply disappeared, leaving the Northwest Mounted Police with the most disturbing unsolved case on their hands. Okay, I want to go back to this barn theory though. So I was wondering about the plumbing, and it looks like barns, I guess, don't have plumbing, so they got away with that one. But if there was a tornado, there's a strong possibility that, it may have just gotten swept away and transported somewhere else. Maybe it went to the land of Oz. Okay, back to this. The unsolved case on their hands. Pots of food hung over dead fires. Ivory needles protruded from garments that were in the process of being mended. Kayaks lay battered and neglected at the lake's edge. Highly prized rifles stood beside the doorways of the empty huts. 7 dogs lay dead of starvation where they had been left tied to trees, and, perhaps most baffling of all, a fresh grave had been opened and the body had been removed. Man, this town, this little village, I guess they had some enemies because they even took the dead out the ground. That's crazy. That's what I'm thinking, at least. I mean, it was only 30 inhabitants of the village. That's not that much in the grand scheme of things. Anyways, in the far north country, a man never leaves the camp on a journey of any consequence without taking his rifle with him. A dog is valued as highly as a fellow human being and is as much a part of the journey as his rifle is. As far as the empty grave is concerned, desecration of the dead is unthinkable to an Eskimo. I mean, that goes across the board. Desecration of the dead, like I was just watching this YouTube video today where the guy was talking about a World War I veteran who was buried like a month ago. He was dug up and strewn about a street with like his clothes that he was buried in, sprinkled, littered across, leaving a path to find the guy's body just in some random parking lot. And it turned out that it was actually the military that did it as a prank. These things happen. Desecration of the dead is highly frowned upon. And so those guys were like jailed, kicked out of the military for sure. As Frank Edwards summarized the case, evidently the village of about 30 inhabitants had been pursuing its normal way of life when for some reason they rushed out of their huts and none of them ever got back from whatever had attracted their attention. For reasons unknown, the inhabitants of the village, men, women, and children, had left it, willingly or unwillingly. In the dead of early winter, skilled trackers failed to find any trail if they had fled over the tundra. The presence of their battered kayaks was mute evidence that they had not ventured out into the lake. Months of patient and far-flung investigation failed to produce a single trace of any member who had lived in the deserted village of Anjakuni. Hey, but you know what? Where did this take place? It's at the far north country, right? Is that Canada? Did I miss that? Eskimos. Alaska? Let's say Alaska. I mean, you know how they treat the natives of the land there. Police don't give a damn, dude. Like, it's sad to say, it's sad to hear. You hate hearing these stories, but you hear it time and time again, how people get kidnapped, or, if they're indigenous people, the cops just put them on the back burner. They don't really try to investigate what happened. And most of the time, it's the cops doing it. Like, they'll kidnap somebody, drive them off to some deserted, frozen land, and let them just fend for themselves. And most of the time, like 99% of the time, they never make it out alive. And yeah, there's stories of that. But I'm not a true crime person. I do listen to true crime, but that's not what I'm presenting here. These are just things that go bump in the night. Now, where was I? Volume 32 of the British Journal of the Society for Physical Research carries statements from Mr. and Mrs. Clifford H. Pye in regard to a house that disappeared. All right, here we go. Let's talk about the house. I'm curious because I wonder about the plumbing again. The Pyes were on a vacation trip traveling by bus when they sighted an attractive house on the outskirts of Boscastle on the coast of northern Cornwall. According to Clifford Pye's statement, the bus had stopped to let off a passenger almost outside of the gate. A rather substantial house standing on the left-hand side of the road. It stood back from the road some 20 yards or so. The house was double-fronted and of a style of architecture which I judged to date from the late 1860s. Oh, okay, so it sounds like this might be a ghost house of some sort. Or early 1870s. Makes no difference. It had a fresh, trim appearance and seemed to have been recently painted. The most striking feature, however, was on the lawn where, amongst beds of scarlet geraniums, there were several wicker or cane chairs or tables over which there were standing large garden umbrellas of black and orange. Okay, that's something straight out of like Alice in Wonderland when they're playing chess, the human chess, right? That happened on that movie, right? I don't know. I haven't seen that movie since I was like in 6th grade. Mr. and Mrs. Pye saw no one on the grounds and saw no sign identifying the place as a hotel, but they had no doubt that such was the case. Mrs. Pye expressed the sentiment that both of them shared. The place was just what they were looking for in a guest house for their stay in Boscastle. Look, you can't just look at a house and assume it's a motel. You know what I mean? You just can't go in assuming that kind of stuff, man. That's how you get shot. But when the Pyes went back to the guest house to book rooms, they found just empty fields running across the cliffs. Okay, so it looks like the house disappeared. Or maybe they took a wrong turn somewhere. It happens. According to Clifford Pye, during our stay, we made a thorough search of the locality, but failed to find any place remotely resembling that we had seen. On a subsequent visit to the Travelga guest house, I told our experience to the proprietor, who assured me that from his knowledge, there was in the neighborhood no such house as I described. Author Edmund P. Gibson, in referring to the case, wrote that the strange experience might best be explained as a collective hallucination engendered by the Pyes' wish to find a suitable place for their vacation. Look, I've been on vacation before, and I can't tell you how many times we've driven past a shady looking Motel 6 that I did not want to stay at. And I never once hallucinated with my partner that there was a grand motel that we could stay at. And then we circled back and it disappeared. Like, that's never happened. I don't know. If that's happened to you, drop it in the comments. Although Gibson theorizes that one of the couple might have conjured the place up in the subconscious and the other might have viewed it telepathically, he admits that to call the incident a collective hallucination describes what occurred but does not explain it. There is no evidence that any such house ever stood on the site noted, so it cannot be called a ghost house unless it was displaced in space. Yet there must have been some underlying cause in the subconscious minds of the Pyes that caused this vision to be seen at the same time by both. Did the Pyes have a collective vision, or did some underlying cause in the subconscious minds permit them to view another dimension, another reality which sits somewhere on the edge of our own? Mr. R. W. Balcom of Live Oak, California, contributed a personal experience shared with his wife to the September 1968 issue of Fate magazine. According to Mr. Balcom, The two of them were traveling to Lake Tahoe during the early morning hours, a few miles east of Placerville on Highway 50. They stopped to eat at a quaint and rustic-styled restaurant, which neither of them had ever noticed on any of their previous trips to the region. I mean, look, sometimes restaurants pop up, you know? Especially back then. Maybe they had some good workers back then, you know? People can build houses, people could build restaurants like nothing. Well, let's see where the story takes us. The food was excellent, and the waitress and cook were so friendly that the Balcombs truly meant their promise to stop back again. They tried to do so on their return drive from the Lake Tahoe, but the restaurant was nowhere to be seen. The Balcombs traveled that route 3 successive weekends in 1962, searching for the friendly little restaurant with the good food that had simply vanished into nothingness. Okay, did they check for the plumbing though? I mean, did they look for foundation and see pipes strewn about? I don't know why the plumbing gets me so worked up in these kind of stories. Since then, we have journeyed over Highway 50 to Lake Tahoe many times, Balcomb concludes, never again finding the little restaurant. Did the Balcombs have the same kind of collective hallucination that the Clifford Pies shared? Or were both couples subconsciously tuned to enter the higher or lower vibratory rate of another dimension? Look, I know I've been to a restaurant. I cannot think of the name of it, but I've been to San Antonio many times. I've been to Austin like twice. And I went to this one restaurant, and I cannot tell you what city it was in, but it was really good. And these are two places that one place I'm very familiar with, and the other not so much, but I can't remember where or what the name even was of this restaurant. These things happen. You take trips and then you find a special spot and then you forget it. You go back looking for it again and you forget where it was. That's not out of the ordinary, but let's just assume this guy knows what he's talking about, and that makes it scary. Lois B. Tracy told of the night in 1934 when she was driving with her family on a stretch of road between Bartow and Fort Meade, Florida, when the Model T Ford in front of them drifted sideways off the road and into the swamp and disappeared. My father jammed on the brakes. We could not understand what happened, she writes Fate in June 1964. The car had not driven off the road, but just had drifted sideways. We pointed our headlights into the swamp and looked with flashlights, but we could find no sign of the car. Frances E. Peterson of Keokuk, Iowa, remembered the Sunday afternoon in 1935 when she and her husband and their 4 children were returning from a weekend visit in Missouri. They decided to take a shortcut on a dirt road. They drove down a hill into a valley. Then, as they reached the rim of the valley, they were astonished to see a well where women in sunbonnets and long full skirts covered by large aprons were drawing in a wooden pail by a windlass? What the hell is a windlass? Look, these are 1935 terminologies. I don't know what a windlass is. Other women were carrying the water in pails balanced on wood yokes across their shoulders. Bearded men who were tending sheep and gathering wood wore loose-fitting trousers, smocks, and large black hats. Okay, were these like Amish people? It sounds Amish to me. I mean, we've been living most of our lives living in the Amish paradise, right? I'm not the only one. The Petersons had never heard of such a settlement in the area of St. Patrick, Missouri, and as it turned out, no one else had either. Okay, they're in Missouri. I feel like that would be Amish country. I mean, Pennsylvania for sure, right? But why not Missouri? Many times since then, we have looked for this lovely old world settlement. Mrs. Peterson commented, "We have inquired of old settlers and relatives in the area, but no one knows of such a valley. Did we ride backward in time?" And that was in Fate, April 1959. The men and women who have had the experiences cited above will always wonder whether or not they had some kind of collective psychic experience, or whether their physical bodies somehow managed to pass into another dimension. What? For the individuals, the answer becomes a bit more clearly stated, although no more clearly defined or explained, for they were left with undeniable physical evidence that they had been confronted with some force as yet beyond the grasp of orthodox science. At about 2 p.m. on Tuesday, April 17th, 1951, Mrs. Ernest Harrelson was working in her farm home south of Georgetown, South Carolina, when she heard a peculiar sound overhead. She had no time to puzzle out the sound before it climaxed with a loud ripping sound. Mrs. Harrelson dashed out her front door to see a shower of shingles and bits of lumber dropping out of the sky. More than half the roof had been torn off an unoccupied tenant house across the road and a bit west of the Harrelson home. Walter S. McDonald, writing in the Charleston, South Carolina News and Courier for April 24th, 1951, stated, "The single section of the roof which did not fall to the rear lies to the right and front of the house, some 50 feet away, while the remainder is scattered over an area of about 150 by 100 feet at the back. There were no signs of burns, and the floor was undamaged except where the chimney fell through. There were many tin and wood shingles scattered about individually, but some small sections of the roof were included in the debris. Small timbers of the roof were broken apart cleanly, as if snapped in half by a powerful force. Yet no one could identify that powerful force. Roofs of buildings, barns, unfortunate men, women, and children may have been claimed by some as yet unidentified force, or these people and things may have been somehow translated into another dimension." Okay, I read that. I don't know what it. I don't comprehend what that last paragraph was, but I think it said that a building just exploded, maybe. So that creeped me out, man. Walking into other dimensions and stuff. There's more stories like that, and that was just one section of being teleported from like Argentinian, and I think Brazil. I think all these people going to Mexico, ending up in Mexico somehow, some way, is pretty creepy, because I went to school with a lot of people who were very familiar with Mexico for one reason or another, and they would always tell me the stories, the superstitions, the myths, the legend that they heard about when they were in Mexico, or from their families that were in Mexico. And I know it's a very ultra like religious area where they believe heavily in saints and the Bible and all that stuff. Even witchcraft, they call it brujeria. It gets creepy. Maybe because they believe more heavily there, that's where all of these weird phenomenal events took place. That's where people would end up. I don't know. I can't account for it. I enjoy reading these stories. I enjoy hearing about these legends, and they creep me out. And I don't know. Maybe they creeped you out. Let me know what you thought. So anyways, I'll catch you on the flip side. Peace out, y'all.